You set out to do everything by the book, but strict best practice financial advice often collides with the compounding, unavoidable expenses of modern life. This split screen illustrates a modern math problem. The median single income sits around $45,000. Meanwhile, the average new car costs $50,000, and we are coming off a 3-year period where housing prices surged. The standard advice is clashing with current economic realities. It is completely normal to feel friction and even guilt when you sit down with a calculator and realize you cannot hit a 25% savings rate or pay straight cash for a reliable car to get you to work. Financial rules of thumb exist for a reason. They are necessary behavioral guardrails, but treating those guardrails as absolute law across every single stage of your life can actually derail your progress. We are going to analyze the gold standard rules of wealth building and define exactly when the math dictates it is safer and smarter to break them. Achieving true financial maturity requires a single distinction. You have to know the difference between breaking a rule out of strategic necessity and breaking it out of behavioral weakness. The baseline guardrails for consumption are strict. For cars, it's the 23-8 rule: 20% down, a 3-year loan, and payments kept under 8% of your gross income. For housing, it's 35-25, 3% down, a 5-year stay, and housing costs capped at 25% of your gross income. If you live in a high cost of living area, strict adherence to that 25% housing cap might price you out of shelter entirely or force a commute that makes your job impossible. Looking at this matrix, we see a strategic rule break. Stretching your housing budget up to 30% or taking a slightly higher car loan makes sense specifically if it secures your access to a high-paying job or utilizes public transit that lowers other costs. Here is the required trade-off. If you stretch the housing budget, you must aggressively manufacture that margin somewhere else. You cannot flex the rules in every category. That means forfeiting the luxury vehicle, skipping the expensive vacations, or cutting out excessive dining. Flexing consumption rules is strictly an investment in securing your baseline employment and shelter. It is never an excuse to fund lifestyle inflation. The standard rule for education is straightforward. Your total student loan debt should never exceed your anticipated first-year salary. There is a single strategic exception to this rule: pursuing a specialized degree, like medicine or law, which inherently requires massive upfront debt to enter the field. You accept a short-term failure on your debt-to-income ratio because the specialized credential provides a significantly higher income ceiling over your entire career. The mandatory trade-off requires extreme discipline. You must live like a student well into your residency or early career, ignoring the temptation to instantly upgrade your lifestyle the moment you get a real paycheck. Breaking the student loan rule is valid only if you have an absolute mathematical commitment to a high-earning career trajectory. The gold standard for investing is saving 25% of your gross income for retirement. But life does not operate on a straight line. There is a phase in your 30s known as the messy middle, where childcare costs, mortgages, and career transitions hit all at once. During this window, strict adherence to a 25% savings rate might force you to rely on high-interest credit cards just to get by. This chart maps out the strategic rule break. You temporarily drop your savings rate to 10 or 15% to maintain liquid cash flow and avoid predatory debt, and then execute a steep recovery back to 25% once the pressure eases. We see a similar tension with windfalls. Statistically, taking a massive lump sum, like an inheritance or property sale, and investing it all at once beats dollar-cost averaging. But statistics do not account for human panic. If you deploy a massive lump sum and the market drops 30% a week later, the emotional devastation can permanently ruin your investing behavior. The strategic alternative is to dollar-cost average that windfall over 12 months. You leave a little potential growth on the table to protect against catastrophic emotional decision-making. Breaking investing rules is about surviving temporary cash crunches and prioritizing long-term behavioral compliance over perfect spreadsheet math. A fully funded 3 to 6 month emergency reserve is sacred. It is the buffer that keeps you from making desperate, high-interest decisions. The strategic exception is draining a small portion of that reserve in early April, specifically to max out the previous year's Roth IRA before the deadline. You do this to capture permanent, use-it-or-lose-it tax advantage space. Once that window closes, you can never go back and recover it. This carries massive risk. It leaves you temporarily exposed. Replenishing that cash reserve must become a break-glass emergency for your budget. Experts often break the cash rule in the exact opposite direction. Seasoned investors might hold 12 to 18 months of excess cash during a bear market to act as opportunistic buyers when assets go on sale. You break cash rules to secure permanent tax advantages or to leverage severe market discounts. Breaking a financial rule is acceptable if your risk level goes down or if your future guaranteed income trajectory goes up. There are strict boundaries. If you carry a credit card balance, fall for 0% promotional traps, or have a stagnant income, the rules are non-negotiable guardrails. Before making a decision, evaluate the trade-off through these 3 specific criteria. First, assess the motive. Is the deviation driven by strategy, like investing in your earning potential, or is it purely consumption, like a luxury upgrade? Second, evaluate the timeline. Are you in a temporary season of life, like the messy middle, or is this a permanent, unsustainable lifestyle choice? Third, confirm you have a concrete, actionable recovery plan to restore your baseline margins once the disruption ends. Strict do-it-yourselfers might handle these exceptions alone forever, but as your wealth and financial complexity escalate, navigating these decisions safely often warrants professional guidance. Treat financial rules like a navigation system. Coming off the path to avoid a massive traffic jam makes perfect sense, provided you keep the system running to recalculate your route back to the main highway.